our tender has just closed, and we're actively involved in discussions with the design consultants and the successful the low bidder, and reviewing our financial options. So things change from day to day. So I just want to provide some perspective. Since the last time we met, the project designs were completed, and a combined tender was issued on May 1st. And that combined tender included the following projects: the Bowen Bay well upgrades and the system interconnection to resolve the water supply issue, the new water mains and culvert replacements in Bluewater Park, and also the Eagle Cliff Cove Bay connection water main and culvert replacements. All of those projects were combined into a single tender. Of course, today we'll focus on the first two, which relate to this group, and the money that's been borrowed for those projects. So the tender closed on July 5th. There was an extended time frame allowed in an effort to encourage and accommodate more bidders and obtain better pricing. So that's why it went on for 2 months as opposed to a shorter time frame. 5 submissions were received in response to the invitation to tender. The bid from NB Contracting, that's a Gibsons-based firm, is substantially lower than the others. And I've just included on the slide here the summary of the 5 bids, and then the 3 projects that make up those bids. The low bid was just under $6 million. 3.7 of that was the Bluewater project components. And I've just added this slide just to provide a perspective on the low bid for the 2 Bluewater projects, the well upgrades and then the water mains and culverts. The total bid was without GST and contingency is $3.7 million. That includes several optional work items. And that I've just shown here that without the optional work items, the that was just over 2.8 million. Some of that cost is related to elements that are not paid by the Bluewater Park budget. So the culverts in particular are paid from municipal funds, and there's a portion of the well upgrades that would be funded from Bowen Bay. So excluding those optional work items, there's close to $700,000 of available contingency that some of those work items would have to go forward, and we want to have some contingency to allow for unforeseen costs that arise. And just looking at this is similar to the slide that were sent out. If we look at that 3.7 million bid, we do have the price of the culverts, plus there's a substantial portion of the rock removal cost, which is an optional work item. Those is related to the culverts as well. Those would be paid from municipal funds and not the Bluewater Park budget. There's also an optional work item related to additional road work. So that's road work that's not strictly repairing the trench after installing water mains. There may be some additional road work that's desired or needed as we move through this project. that would be from municipal funds as well. And so it's close to, if we look at it that way, we're close to what the Bluewater Park budget of 3.1 million borrowed funds allows for. And I mentioned that there are several optional work items that we could choose to defer. Switching the service connections from the 2-inch main to the 6-inch main on Captain's Way is something that we hope to do. That could be done over time by municipal staff, and we could defer that piece. There's the existing connection between King Edward Bay and Bowen Bay is likely serviceable. It is a different method of operating where we're going to be pumping from the Bowen Bay wells up to the King Edward Bay reservoir and then supplying all three systems from that reservoir tank. The flow back to Bowen Bay, that's not how things have been operated, and we expect that it should work with the existing connection. If it doesn't work properly, then that would have to be upgraded. We have to make sure that everybody isn't experiencing a drop in level of service as a result of this project. There's some older hydrants that we had hoped to replace, but that could be deferred. There's quite a lot of tree removal costs in those optional work items, and I believe that we could defer a lot of that and potentially not incur those costs simply by monitoring the trees after construction.
Hey Patrick, I've got quite a few questions going in the chat. Do you mind if I interrupt you and
Do you want
ask
to
them?
address those now? Sure.
That's okay with you.
Yeah.
So we've got one is how will the substantial cost difference in NB Contracting's bid be evaluated for feasibility and comprehensiveness? What measures are in place to ensure the lower bid will not compromise the project quality?
Well, we've discussed the bid with NB. They're standing behind it. They feel that they've bid the project adequately. It is, of course, whenever you have a bid that's substantially lower than the consultant's pre-tender estimates and the other bids, it's a cause for concern. We believe that it is in line with our earlier cost estimates and in line with the money that was borrowed for the project as a result of those estimates. So I think that we do feel that the project can be done for this price. There's going to need to be close eye on the consultants or on the contractors on the part of our staff, as well as our design consultants and contract administrator, Urban Systems. And so paying close attention to project oversight and contract administration is going to be a key on this job. Realistically, it's from the point of view of the Bluewater Park budget, it's the only bid that's essentially affordable that allows us to complete the scope of work that we'd intended to within the available budget that's been already borrowed. So I'm hopefully that addresses that question.
Okay, thank you. And we've got, will the new water mains be considered fire safe by the insurers?
The new water mains are large enough to deliver fire flows. In order to deliver adequate fire flows to all of, so there may be parts of the Bluewater Park system where adequate fire flows can be delivered. In order to deliver adequate fire flows to the entire system, there would need to be either a new reservoir tank constructed for the Bluewater system, or a new dedicated main from the proposed higher level tank in King Edward Bay. So I guess it's a mixed answer. It's better fire protection, but may not be complete fire protection for the entire system.
Thank you. Do we have experience with this contractor from earlier projects on Bowen? Have we checked references in other municipalities where they may have worked? Insurance companies, specifically on.
We don't have experience on Bowen with this contractor. We have checked references, and their references are generally good. Urban Systems does have a substantial amount of experience with this contractor, mostly with projects on the Sunshine Coast. They are just finishing a water main project on the Sunshine Coast that's involves, it's not as big as this job. It involves a lot of the similar elements. So that's what we know about this contractor.
Thank you. There's a follow-up saying that this job might be bigger than their typical job. Is there a possibility we could have been wrong in estimates on how much this job will cost, and now we're left with a bottom of the barrel contractor?
I wouldn't say it's a bottom of the barrel contractor. They have good references. They do, from what I can tell and from what Urban Systems has reported, they do good work. This may be pushing the envelope a bit for them in terms of the size of the job, but that's just the way it is. I think that it doesn't mean that they can't do the job. I think we do have a confidence in their ability to complete this work. Yeah.
Okay. How does deferring necessary upgrades like service connection switches, hydrant replacements, and main upgrades compromise the water system's integrity and or increase the risk of future repair costs?
Well, anything that we defer is just that. It's deferred. It doesn't mean that we don't want to do it. I think we do need to switch over those service connections that are on the older 2-inch line on Captain's Way. And it may be that we can do that with this contractor. And even if we do defer that component initially, if we find ourselves with enough contingency remaining towards the end of the job, the intention would be to proceed with some of those deferred items in order of priority.
Thank you. And why has the cost for a culvert replacement been reduced from $900K to $400K?
Well, that's the difference between a consultant's estimate of how much culverts will cost to replace, and then a contractor's bid price of what they will charge us to do that. And sometimes that happens. You do get dramatic differences between estimates and bid prices.
Okay.
And it's actually a little more than $400K if you factor in the rock removal. It's closer to 600, but it is substantially less than what the consultants had estimated.
Okay, thank you. And how does Urban Systems cost factor into the overall cost projected?
Sorry, say that one again.
Urban systems costs, how are they factored into the overall project costs?
Well, they're not at this point. They provided us estimates a while back, like back in 2023 when we were looking at borrowing money, and they provided more detailed estimates prior to tender. Once you have a tender process that's that's been done and bids from contractors, then that becomes your cost that you're working with, and you're no longer working with consultant estimates anymore.
No, this is the consultant fees.
Oh, the consultant fees. Um, sorry, say
Well,
that
where-
again, then?
Where is your placeholder for the urban system fees and the overall cost of the projects on your presentation here?
Okay, yeah, you're right. That does have to be included in the overall costs. My assumption was that we were paying for those costs. We were paying for consultant costs using reserve funds.
No,
And okay, well, we have been so far. That is what
that was
we've been
just to
doing.
get us going, but the 3.1 million was to include that.
Right. Okay. Well, then, if we are paying for those costs out of the 3.1, those would have to be then included in that overall picture of the total costs. You're right.
Okay, thank you. I've got something about how are we planning to handle the workforce getting to and from the island? Has this been factored into the budget?
The transportation of workforce to and from the island is part of the NB contracting, well, all the contractors' bids. That's what's required to do the work. It includes any kind of transport and accommodation. Being based in Gibson's, I believe NB's approach would be to move their equipment that they require for the job by barge and um, either run their workforce using boats or water taxi from Gibson's. So
Okay,
that probably helped contribute to their, competitive pricing.
okay, interesting. Okay. As this goes on, have we already pulled the loan? If so, how much are we paying on interest per month? I think that might come up in Kristen's slides.
I
And
don't think we've started with pulling the loan yet.
Okay,
Oh, we've just started pulling the loan, and
Just
that comes
started.
up in mine. Yeah, that comes up
okay,
in
so
my
I'll wait for
slide.
that discussion for the finance section. Budget management, assuming urban systems has provided BIM budget versus actuals for previous project performance. If not, seems like a reasonable request to understand if the contractor will be likely to scope change to address cost overruns and the eventual impact to Bluewater Park.
So just say that one again there.
I'm not sure what the question is there. Urban Systems has provided budget versus actuals for previous project performance. It's a reasonable request to understand if the contractor will be likely to scope change to address cost overruns, and will this have an impact on Bluewater Park? I guess is the question.
Yeah, I can
Yeah.
elaborate if
Thank you.
helpful, Patrick. Patrick, you commented that Urban Systems provided a reference for this contractor. I think as residents, we're all concerned about fiscal management, so there's no comment on that. Maybe Kirsten's going to respond to that. But it would be helpful to understand if Urban Systems has a view on this contractor's performance, and that the data is their budget versus actuals on previous projects. That's the truth there. So if that's not been provided, it feels like that would be a reasonable request so that we have a forecast of actually what's going to happen and early understanding of the fiscal management. Thank you.
Okay, well, the feedback we got from Urban Systems is that they have been fair in their claims for extras or scope changes on projects, but that they're they're also very aware of what they've bid and what's included in the contract, and don't necessarily miss any opportunities um, to apply for scope changes on the project. So I think that's something that we have to expect, and it's going to require close management and administration of their contract accordingly.
Again, just going to double down. I think seeing actuals and against budget is a fair request, and not having Urban Systems view on that, because they're probably doing the same. That's my 2 cents on this.
Okay.
Thank you, Jana. I've got a comment about Bowen Island estimating not well, being way off in the cost and speed and complexity, and a comment about taking a loan out without knowing the price is irresponsible, and the money is currently okay. We're getting into money questions. We can leave that for our CFO.
I would comment that the prices that we're seeing are very close to the original estimates and what was the borrowing was based on.
Can I interject here, please?
Okay. Yeah.
You are actually not saying that. What you're saying is that you have come up with a number yourself, which you've then put out for tender as the amount that you're willing to pay. That's irrelevant. That doesn't make any difference. What the contractors have come back to you and said are, this is how much it's going to cost. Now, your other contractors, how much discrepancy is there between the one contractor that's within your budget and the other contractors who bid significantly higher? What is the discrepancy there? Because that should be a red flag for you, sir.
Well, it is a cause for concern. I don't disagree with that. But it's
my point here is that you have estimated something, you've put it out to tender, and you've thought that it's going to be something. You're wrong. That's the answer. You have 5 or more, I don't know how many it was, contractors who've all said that it's going to be more. You have one contractor who's based on a different part of the mainland, which is a ferry ride, 2 ferry rides actually away, who's saying, oh yeah, we can do it. But their Facebook, their Instagram, their website all say otherwise. So where are you getting this information? Why are you pushing this through? You have to use some common sense on this, and it doesn't appear that you are. You're just looking at dollars.
okay. I don't agree with what you're saying. I think we are
I'm gonna
doing
move
our
on now. I've got a question from
Let's
Trevor
move on.
Hodge. Yeah, so thank you so much, Patrick. Trevor Hodge, why is the King Edward Bay Bowen Bay connection a cost to Bluewater Park? That's from Trevor.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that Trevor sent earlier. I think it's makes sense for that to, if it's needed, to be a shared cost. We have to make sure that when we're reconfiguring the system, which is the plan here, we're pumping up from the Bowen Bay wells to the King Edward Bay Reservoir and then feeding from there, that there can't be any reduction in level of service to the Bowen Bay residents as a result of that. So the reason it's put in as an optional item is that if it doesn't perform well enough, if the existing connection isn't adequate and needs to be upgraded, then it needs to be considered as part of the project, because it's needed to ensure that everybody is maintaining the same level of service as they had before we started this. But it also improves the situation for Bowen Bay. It upgrades the size of their connection to allow for fire flow so that in the future, when they do get to the point of upgrading their mains, they have an ability to deliver fire flows to the system. So that's, in that sense, it's a benefit to them. So it's a bit of both. It's a cost to the project, the base project, and it's a benefit to Bowen Bay. So if we do have to proceed with that piece, I believe some sort of cost sharing would be appropriate.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for flagging that, Trevor. We'll keep that in mind. Just so I am clear, my insurance company notified all this work will not deliver adequate fire flows to bring our insurance costs down. Will Captain's Way be considered hydrant approved by the Insurance Fire Underwriter Survey when this work is finished? Currently, I believe Captain's Way is attached to the Bluewater 80,000 gallon tank and our street fails because of ability to pump water needed in a fire. When will Captain's Way be classified as hydrant approved?
It may not be until we have a connection to a proper size tank. And that's not part of this project.
Okay, thank you.
And just, Steph and Patrick,
Mhm.
just to give you some background further, that is a future phase for an additional tank, whether it's located where the existing Bluewater tank is currently on Mutiny Lane, or it's a combination with future imminent development that's happening in the Bluewater area, some sort of agreement. But this future phase would be an expected of some cost sharing with Bluewater users as well as Bowen Bay, because Bowen Bay does not have a current water tank after this interconnection is made. Developer contribution, and we would be expecting grants for a future phase for addition of tankage.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, okay. Got to the end of that. Patrick, you're off the hot seat for a sec. We're going to welcome our Chief Financial Officer. Oh, one more question about fire. What size is required of the tank?
A similar size to the existing King Edward Bay tank. So that's close to 600 cubic meters.
Okay, thank you so much.
But that's taken into account the future Arbutus Ridge tank that's going above it, as well as a developer tank. That all has to factor in. So that sizing is going to adjust, right? Depending on next steps with development.
That would be the size required in some form or other, but exactly how it gets delivered is a question.
Thank you so much. Patrick, would you mind to stop sharing your presentation and we can get the CFO finance slides up onto the screen? And thank you all so much for your contribution to this discussion. Much appreciated. You know what? I think I can kick you off myself. I'm going to do it. There you go. Thanks. And Kristen, get your slides up there.
Okay, thanks.
This is Kristen Watson, Chief Financial Officer of Bowen Island Municipality. And Ron, I'm renaming you.
Okay.
Perfect, thanks.
Okay, so I wanted to share a little bit of expenditures to date, where we're at in the borrowing process, and that kind of information for everyone today. So in the financial plan that was approved for 2024 through 2028, the plan is to implement the parcel tax in a phased approach. So for the first 3 years, as the project is underway and construction is going on, The parcel tax can be lower because we'll be looking only at interest-only payments for that period. And that's because we're going to use a form of borrowing that's interim borrowing. So it'll be like progressive borrowing. We only borrow as the project proceeds, and we don't borrow more than we need to. So for the first 3 years, we believe that $550 per year would be enough to satisfy those interest-only payment requirements. Then in the last 2 years of the financial plan is at some point within those last 24 months of the 5-year financial plan, that interim borrowing would need to be rolled into a long-term debt. And that's where we start making interest and principal repayments on the loan. At that time, we would be implementing the full impact of the parcel tax, the second phase, for a total of $1,275 per year. Now that's based on an interest rate assessment of where they're currently sitting, which we expect now they're higher than where they will be 3 years down the road, 4 years down the road. My hope is that we will hold off on finalizing, on rolling that debt into long-term fixed payments until the very last point that we can, which will provide for the lowest interest rate. Hopefully in the future, interest rates will be coming down. So my intent is to defer locking that in until such time as we believe that we're going to get the most preferential interest rates, because that will determine the long-term payment over the entire length of the loan. So the proceeds, of the parcel tax will fund the principal and interest payments once we have locked that in. The total authorized debt is up to 3.1 million. And as I said, we will draw that down as the project progresses and will minimize the interest costs. I wanted to share with
question. Sorry. Do we have a contingency if the project exceeds 3.1 million?
There's contingency in the project itself. I'm going to speak for Patrick. The maximum amount of the debt is 3.1, so we can't spend more than that, not without going back to get additional permission to borrow. So the contingency would have to be a scope reduction in the plan. Patrick, would you concur with that, or would you have any other thoughts on that?
Yeah, the only options that we would have in terms of contingency where costs are exceeding or projected to exceed the 3.1 would be to go back to seek approval to borrow more, which is time consuming, and I don't know how that would go over, or reducing the scope of what actually gets done.
Okay, thank you.
So to date, total expenditures to date are just under 200,000. It's been spent on design of the system. So those are fees paid to Urban Systems for design. And so what I'm calling soft costs. So those are the costs for the spray painted lines on the road. Those are the costs for site surveys and plans and things like that. I just did the initial drawdown on the borrowing in June. I have drawn 500,000 on the loan. So that's of course to fund those costs that we've spent year to date, 200,000. And as well, given that we anticipate the contract to be awarded and construction to start in August, then we have some money there to start with those mobilization costs and kickoff project costs. So I will continue to access that funding as needed as the project proceeds, but just for now, the only expenditure incurred so far has been any interest to date on this first initial drawdown that just took place at the end of June. The next part of my presentation, I was going to talk a little bit about the metered rate billing, but I wondered if maybe I should stop here and just see if there was any questions about this portion to date or any so far.
I think I have just comments, more concern regarding the urban system consulting fees putting us over budget already was one. And then where I think Patrick is Reeks is repeating his red flag comment about the low bid. So I'm not sure.
Because we're already exceeding the 3.1 million based on these projections, Patrick. And there's a couple of roadblocks that are in the way. The community and mayor and council has given you a cap of 3.1 million. That cannot be exceeded. Reducing scope, especially high-risk items, would be then contravening our agreements with the other communities of Bowen Bay and King Edward Bay that we would be upgrading all of our high-risk water mains in order to connect into the overall system, bring the overall three systems together. So we're in a bit of a quandary here of how we're going to proceed with this without being able to go over that 3.1 million and meet our obligations to the communities.
Right. Well, the only option is to reduce scope. And I didn't get to that part of my presentation. We kind of switched over to this one. But if we were looking at what we plan to do, what's in the current plan, what we could potentially look at if we're getting overly concerned about budget versus actuals. We've got the three water mains on the cul-de-sac, so Clipper Place, Forecastle Way, and Privateer Road, and that would be approximately 220,000 of deferred costs. And again, I'm saying deferred because we still have to do it at some point. We just aren't able, we may not be able to do it as part of this particular project and with this contractor.
As somebody who's sitting at that intersection, I don't see that as a viable option or an acceptable one. So what are you going to do to actually do that? This is literally where my house is, at those three intersections.
Well, I think what I've presented is that we do have an ability to do the entire scope of work with if we're deferring or pushing out the optional work items that are included in the bid. The only reason that we would have to defer the water mains that we've planned are if we're encountering conditions during construction that escalate the costs, and it's looking like we're not going to have enough to complete the job.
And
that's the thing. We don't have an ability to increase that cap, so we have to do something. We'd have to do something to make it within our budget.
And if it's the non-standard road conditions, is that really fair to be expecting the Bluewater users to be paying for road base upgrades? Because it's already been acknowledged many times by the municipality that the roads throughout Bowen do not meet municipal road standards. Is that really fair for us to have to then bear the cost of all of that?
Well, the cost of restoring the road is part of the water main installation.
Yeah.
It's just the trench. I mean, any additional road work would be municipal cost.
Yeah, but if you're having to blast through bedrock, that kind of thing, because the roads weren't built up properly in the first place, that's an issue. Plus also has alternative methods of reutilizing the existing water main trench versus digging in a new water main trench been explored.
Yeah, I mean the ideal and the design was done by Urban Systems, and they considered a lot of factors, including the location of the existing water main. Ideally, you want to keep your new water main away from the existing one so you can maintain service during construction, and then switch it over in phases as the construction progresses.
Or cities like Vancouver, Burnaby, etc., don't have that option. So they're doing this all the time by replacing water mains in existing trenches and providing temporary water to the connections in a section. So there's all sorts of options out there that could have been explored here, Patrick.
Well,
Okay,
they
thank
did
you.
explore, they did
Oh.
explore a lot of options, and they came up with the best design that they could. That's what we've tendered.
I think the concern is, Patrick, that you have explored other options, fine, but every option has told you that it's going to exceed 3.1 million. And you keep giving very clear excuses to why that one contractor is a good one and it will work. And I have very big concerns about this, seeing how other projects have progressed on Bowen Island. You have a community center that was supposed to be built and still isn't even finished. It was supposed to be a community center, and now it's going to be what, a municipal hall, pretty much. You have a wastewater treatment plant that didn't take off. Sorry, if you want to interrupt, go for it. But what I was trying to get at here is I don't think you're actually looking at this clearly. You will go over budget. That is a guarantee. Our roads are not up to snuff. The water system here has been a problem forever, and yet we're just kind of sweeping it under the rug like nothing's going to happen. It will happen. It will go over budget. What is your
So
plan when it goes over budget?
what would you suggest then, Patrick? You know,
That's not our job to suggest, Patrick. That's the municipality's job.
Okay, I'm not appreciating the tone right now. I'd like to move on with Kristen's presentation. Patrick, sorry that I interrupted your presentation. I got to the end of the chat and thought we were done. I'm going to suggest that Kristen finish her presentation now. And if we have time, we can finish Patrick's. Kristen, are you ready to roll on all these numbers, like spreadsheets?
Well, I don't have any further information to provide about costs of the project or expenditure of project funds to date. I was going to talk a little bit, just it is a community information meeting, so there are topics to discuss that are not project related, but I don't feel like I want to move on to that if we're not wrapping this piece up yet. So
Okay,
were
Patrick,
there
did you
any
want
other
to go back
questions
to?
were there any other questions in the chat? Steph?
I don't. Yeah, I really appreciate Rob McGregor's comment about staying focused on the water issues and not dragging out all the sins. Thank you, Rob. Patrick, did you want to show any more slides? My apologies again for missing that.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right. So I think this is where we left off, that there could be a budget shortfall and there's a need for deferring of optional work items. The other, which is more of a last resort, would be deferral of some of the water main that we plan to do. And we heard from some residents that they don't see that as an acceptable solution. But if we've got a situation where, you know, it's looking like we are going to be over budget. If in order to avoid deferring some of the work and reducing the scope, the only other approach would be to borrow additional funds. And I mean, that's something that we could do. It is a lengthy process. As you know, we've already gone through it. And it might be unpopular with the community to go back and go through that process again. We do have, as I was presenting earlier, there are contingencies built into the projections and the cost estimates. And if we have contingency at the end of the job, we can, as we get towards the end, we can go back and address some of that deferred work. The tender includes allowances for tree removal, rock removal, and over excavation, and these entire amounts may not be required. So in terms of our next steps, our options for awarding the tender are to award it as submitted and execute the contract, excluding the optional work items. And we would bring those optional work items into the contract as change orders as needed, as and if needed. Other options would be to enter into negotiations with NB to award a reduced scope of work, or to award as tenders and complete a scope change after award. That's if we're looking at reducing the scope of work. And as I presented here, I'm in favor of, and we're recommending that we proceed with the first option, which is to award the tender as submitted and execute excluding the optional work items. Council does take a break after the July 22nd meeting for until September. So if possible, we're really trying to get that award to happen at the July 22nd council meeting, so that construction can be expected to begin in August, probably towards the end of August, and likely extend through until early 2025. And that was all.
Thanks, Patrick. I've got a question about grant programs being available federally or provincially. This comes up a lot.
Yeah.
I'm gonna answer that one.
Yeah, I mean, we're always looking for grant opportunities. We don't, unfortunately, have a grant for this project that we can apply to or apply for it.
Thank you. And then I've got one from Ian. Is there any way that the community could support the contractor to minimize costs to maintain budget? Sure what that means.
I'm not sure if there is. I mean, there's going to need to be interaction and cooperation between the contractor and the community, particularly in replacing the service connections as this work proceeds. There may be a need for space during construction for staging of excavated material or pipe material or other materials. And there are some spots that we've identified with the contractor, but potentially having the use of space on somebody's property may come up. I don't know. That's going to be a question for the contractor as they plan and execute their work.
It's a nice question, Ian. Thank you. And Janie's question, when will this begin? Will the work begin?
Hopefully towards the end of August.
Okay, great. Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions?
I have a comment, and I don't know how to put my hand up on this system, so if that's all right, I'll just butt in. It seems to me, Patrick and Kristen, that most of the questions here are concerning the fact that we are taking a low bid, and nobody really expects us to get this done under budget. So, on the other hand, if we ignore the low bid, we would be so far from being able to do this project that we couldn't even start it. So I guess I'm in a way, I'm asking, what happens when inevitably we get to a point where 3.1 million is about to be exceeded? What are we going to do? We're going to down tools and stop until we raise some more money? Is the municipality going to carry the project through to completion and then look about recovering the funds from the community? I mean, what are the steps? Because I think we can all see that this is where it's likely to go. We're already over budget before we start because we haven't factored in the project management costs. There may be other things that occur to us later that we haven't factored in. So So what, you know, if you want to leave us with a warm, fuzzy feeling from this meeting, I think it's important that you let us know how it's going to unfold, and how we're going to get this project done if indeed the costs come in higher than we have.
Well,
Mhm.
Yeah,
you hear-
I think, Mike, that's also part of the discussion with council on the date when we ask to have the contract awarded. You know, we've got to put other alternatives and what are the project risks, and unfortunately this meeting is probably happening before we have all of the answers to those questions. But we are working on putting our plan in front of council right now, which is going to include alternatives such as potential scope reductions, as Patrick has outlined, and then any potential possibilities for internal borrowing that the municipality could potentially provide. I feel the message from the community is likely if there were additional requests to borrow externally, that's probably going to be a difficult hurdle for us to get over. So, you know, all of those options are going to have to be in our report to council for the 22nd.
Thank you, Kristen. So that's the award of bid is on July 22nd. Most of you, I expect, will get the emails from the municipality that will give you the agenda for that council meeting if you'd like to tune in on YouTube or in person. Or if you have public comments, you can tune in on Zoom. That's going to take us over to my little speech about community engagement and outreach. As you know, we're doing these meetings quarterly, and they're preceded by a published agenda with material, and subsequently high-level synopsis of the meeting will be published in the form of notes. We're calling that sort of package of material a newsletter. We have the project page on the website, which is updated regularly. And we have an email address, which is for all the water systems. And it has Patrick and Kristen and Annette, who is our utilities coordinator, and Garrett, who is our man on the ground. It's water@bimbc.ca. If you have any more questions in the middle of the night, you won't get an answer in the middle of the night, but that's your access, water@bimbc.ca. Our next information meeting for this project is on Wednesday, September 11th at noon via Zoom. And I understand this is a stressful topic, and it's difficult, and appreciate the concerns you have, and just want to thank you all for your contribution and patience. Okay. Thank you so much.
Steph, did you mention the July 18th meeting?
There's a meeting on July 18th for all the water systems regarding our change in our governance structure. That was a presentation we were going to be doing today. We ran out of time. It's the same presentation will be on July 18th, talking about how we council is wanting to shift to get a little closer to the community and sort of change it from a local advisory committee structure to more of this kind of a structure where we're doing information meetings. And Kristen will be explaining that whole process on Thursday, July 18th at 6 p.m. on Zoom.
Thank you.
You will have received an email to that effect. Okay. Thank you again.
Thanks.
Thank
Bye.
you. Have a good
Bye.
day. Bye-bye.